Friends, we're going to start in about 10 seconds once we get everyone loaded into the room. So give us about 10 more seconds as people join the session. Good evening. My name is Tim Chapin. I'm the Dean of the College of Social Sciences and Public Policy here at Florida State University, which is home to the Institute of Politics at Florida State University, also known as the IOP at FSU. It's a real pleasure to welcome you to tonight's event. I'm particularly pleased that this evening we're joined by our new FSU president, President Richard Mccullough, who's been here a whopping, I think, 10 weeks now about. President Mccullough is going to offer some opening remarks, but let me just briefly introduce you to President Mccullough to our audience. President Mccullough began his term just a few months ago and has already begun to make a great impact here on campus. He brings more than 30 years of academic research and leadership experience to the role, and we are just thrilled to have him as our new president at Florida State University. President Mccullough, let me turn it over to you, please.
Thank you, Dean Chapin. Good evening. It's a pleasure to join the Institute of Politics at Florida State University and welcoming you to a very special edition of the Institute's Strengthening American Democracy Speaker Series. It's a great honor to have Senator Mitt Romney with us tonight for an important conversation about how we can strengthen the democratic institutions through our civic engagement, political participation, and public service. The IOP is particularly an interesting institute because it's nonpartisan, and it's really about bringing people together to have open discussions in the way that we want to, not only in universities, but in the United States itself. This is what makes the United States great, that we can all come together, have civil discourse, and then at the end of the day, we can agree to disagree, but we all walk away furthering the great state, the great United States. And so that's what the IOP is supposed to be all about. We really look forward to hearing from Senator Romney tonight, and we really appreciate the IOP in encouraging this responsible civic engagement and the respectful freedom of expression. We want to thank the support. We want to thank thanks to the support of Governor DeSantis, the Florida legislature, for establishing the Institute of Politics at FSU in the nationally regarded College of Social Sciences and Public Policy, again, with the overarching goal of showcasing the role of politics and improving the lives of Americans. Since the launch of the Institute last year, the Institute has been working hard to bring speakers from across the full political spectrum, which is the goal of the Institute. And so we're so pleased tonight that Senator Romney, a Republican from Utah, can join us. As we all know, Senator Romney needs no introduction, but I'll say a few words about him in just a moment. Senator Romney is a highly regarded statesman who's known for putting principles before politics and has demonstrated his ability to reach across the aisle to find areas of agreement and compromise. He was sworn into the United States Senate in 2019 and was the Republican nominee for president in 2012. He previously served as the governor of Massachusetts from 2003 to 2007 and led the 2002 Salt Lake Organizing Committee for the Winter Olympics. Prior to entering public service, he led a successful business career as the co-founder of Bain Capital, a leading investment company, and the turnaround CEO of Bain & Company, an international management consultant firm. Senator Romney earned his bachelor's degree from Brigham Young University, his JD and MBA from Harvard University. And guiding tonight, we're very fortunate to have Al Cardenas, a lawyer and lobbyist who's been active in state and national politics throughout his entire career and a great friend of Florida State University and one of the original visionaries of the IOP for FSU. Al served twice as the chairman of the Republican Party in the state of Florida. So I know we're all looking forward to a lively discussion. And so I'm going to turn it over to Al to get the conversation started. And thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Welcome to FSU. And, you know, we're very excited to have created this, Senator Romney, and I'll get right into the first question, which is really, which has to do with the very creation of the Institute. And many people say that politics in a democracy is a reflection of society. And we all see society and politics in Washington getting a little meaner, a little angrier. I remember, traveling the country with you in 2008 and 2012 when you were a Republican nominee for president. And I must tell you that I see a change in our country in respects of this anger in the political process and the inability for us to have, in many instances, a civilized discourse, which has represented what America should be all about. And I just want to get a sense from you as to where, when we get started, as to what do you think about all this and how do we get America to have this toned down and have us be more civil, and then listen to your remarks before we embark on some of the questions we want to ask.
Well, thanks, Al. Good to be with you and with President Mccullough, and appreciate the chance to speak with you and your colleagues. Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who are concerned, as you are, Al, with the growing anger and crude nature of comments that are leveled back and forth between politicians these days and between people. And frankly, I think a lot of that starts at the very top. We've had leaders of the nation that have called on our better angels, Abraham Lincoln's line, and then we've had others who, through their own words and actions, have tried to draw on the darker side of human nature. And I think as long as we continue to have people who are making political hay out of drawing on the most base elements of humanity, why we're going to continue to be highly divided. I don't know where that ends, but I think at some point you're going to see leaders that stand up and say enough already. It's interesting to me here in Washington, the biggest surprise I had in coming to the US Senate was to find that the senators get along. People are very cordial, very friendly, collaborative, Republicans and Democrats. We go to dinner at each other's homes. We spend time with each other, but the cameras go on, and there are a few people who are pretty caustic and pretty extreme, and that gets a lot of excitement from the base. But we're going to have, in my opinion, a movement more towards the kind of respect and dignity which is associated with, frankly, the nation which is the leader of democracies around the world. So I'm hoping to see more of that from the highest office of the land. I think President Biden is a good person. I don't know that he has the presence yet of his own to make that kind of a change, but I think we'll see that ultimately. I sure hope so.
Thank you. Before your stints in public office and public service, you were in the business of looking into our economy and giving good advice to your investors and to your partners. We're entering into what some call the beginning of an inflation, whether it's long-term, short-term, I don't know, but there are trillions of dollars, liquid dollars, obviously out there in our economy. There's more coming if these bills that you're contemplating pass. That's another 3 trillion or so. There are 2 trillion already in the government that hasn't been even put into the street. And so the question is, are we heading into an inevitable inflation, and can we control some of that?
Well, I in my business life, I rarely was able to predict what the economy was going to do going forward. And we were investing a lot of money for people, buying companies, starting companies, selling companies. That was what I did. And frankly, that was my career. Politics is what's happened at the end of my career, but my business life was really what I did with my life. And I never found myself focused on trying to figure out what the economy was going to do. Instead, I said, look, I've got to make sure that any investment that I make is able to be, to survive if we have a recession and thrive if we don't. And so I looked at scenarios that said, look, what happens if we have a big recession, or what happens if we have high levels of inflation? What happens to this enterprise? What will happen to the investment that I'm making? And I made those choices on that basis. So, I mean, there's an old line that Yogi Berra used to say, which is, he said, I don't like forecasting the future, particularly if the future is involved. And so I find myself in the same category. Now, we're seeing inflation, and there are a number of things that are causing the inflation. One, of course, is the amount of spending that's coming out of Washington, in particular the 1.9 trillion that the president put through in January, sending checks out to people, checks out to states. People are spending money, and that's driven up demand. And of course, if supply is constrained and demand is extensive, why, you're going to see some inflation. That's part of it. Part of it as well is just the fact that following the pandemic, our supply chain has not been able to reorganize itself and to get goods to people on a timely basis. And so that's caused prices to go up. And then we've had some weather events. Hurricanes along the Texas, Louisiana coast have meant a lot of the petrochemicals that we need to manufacture various products are not available. Semiconductor chips coming largely from Taiwan are not available to the auto industry. These have also caused inflation. So the people who try and make a living out of forecasting these things think we're going to have inflation for a while, a year or two, and then it'll slow back down. I don't know the answer, but I do know this, which is if I'm planning investments for myself, or if I were planning a personal investment in my career, I'd say, look, I've got to make sure that regardless of the economic circumstances that are developed, I'm doing a good job, and the investment is going to pay off. So that's what keeps me from losing sleep at night.
The other issue that has many people scratching their heads, Senator, is the fact that our economy is rolling, demand for products is way up there, and yet we have a labor shortage. When if you look at the numbers in America, there are a lot of unemployed Americans still out there. I travel and I go to hotels that are customarily full. They're half full, maybe. Their restaurants may not be open. Many of the owners, small business owners, tell me they're having a roughest time at getting employees and servicing their client base. What's this phenomenon about in terms of not being able to fulfill these job entries when we have so many people that are not working?
Well, I wish it were only one thing, and then we could address that one problem and solve our labor shortage, and that, of course, would reduce the pressure for greater inflation as well. But it's really the result of many things. One, of course, is that during the COVID crisis, people stayed home, and a lot of people said, you know what? I'm not going to go back to work because it was not bad staying home. I used to have to pay for childcare, and by the time I'd paid for my childcare, I wasn't really getting ahead, and I'm going to stop doing that. So one is people got used to staying home, and by the way, it wasn't that bad. Number two, we sent out a lot of checks to people during the pandemic, and particularly the checks that went out in January and February of this year. A lot of money came into people's pockets, and so they don't have the same level of urgency to go back to work because, well, they got a few more months or weeks that they can live off the checks that have already been received. Number three, some folks are just frankly afraid of getting COVID again, and they don't want to get out there and get COVID, and so they're gonna stay home until the COVID pandemic is really completely gone. And then I'll mention one more, and that is some folks just don't know where they can get childcare. They've got a child or two that's at home, and they can't find someone to take care of the child, so they're staying home because they can't get childcare. So all of these have come together in such a way that people are sort of pulling back. And I think, by the way, people on this call could talk about their own experiences, but I think a lot of folks are saying, this is a time to look for a better job. And I was working before, maybe I was working in a restaurant or in a grocery store chain or whatever. And I want to see if I can upgrade my skills, maybe work from home, find a job that pays more. Lots of reasons for taking a closer examination of the job opportunities in the market out there. So that's put a lot of people sort of on the sidelines for now. I think we'll come back with a robust labor force, but some folks, I think, permanently will stay home because, frankly, it wasn't bad doing so.
Yeah, I think the new normal, after all of the good reasons you've given us, is that a lot of jobs will be different, including in my professional services. A lot of people are going to be working from home. The demand for space is going to be different to service clients. I think there's a new normal coming, and we'll see what it is. But thanks for that explanation, which heads us into into the next question, which is, do you have a prognosis as to the two big bills that you're debating now in the Senate and in the House, the infrastructure bill and the social services bill?
Well, as you know, Al, but maybe not everyone on the call does, the Senate has an unusual operating rule, and that is for something to pass in the Senate requires 60 votes. And because each party has 50 votes, for anything to pass in the Senate, you have to get 10 people in the opposition party to join you. So that means that pretty much by definition, the bills that come before us are bipartisan. Because if you don't have Republicans and Democrats together on a bill, it's not going to pass. But there's an exception to that. And the exception is for any legislation on spending or taxing. And in that case, you only need a simple majority. And because the vice president is able to break the tie in the Senate, the Democrats have that simple majority. And so the two big bills before Congress right now, one on physical infrastructure and the other a social safety net, if you will, they're being worked out now entirely by the Democrats. The physical infrastructure bill was bipartisan, and we had Republicans and Democrats work together and pass a $550 billion bill out of the Senate, waiting now in the House. But the social spending bill, that's something the Democrats are looking at all on their own, and we Republicans have no input on that, no vote on that, because they can pass it on their own. And so both bills are being held up right now because some Democrats don't think there's enough for social programs or for environmental programs. Others think that they like to see different priorities and higher taxes put in place. So the Democrats are battling amongst themselves. I wish I could tell you that I had a good window on what's going to happen, but I'm not invited to the Democratic caucus meeting, so I don't really know what they're going to do. But the latest suggests that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, two senators, are a little skeptical of the amount of money that's being spent. They want to take a closer look at what's being evaluated. And what do I think? I think in the final analysis, the physical infrastructure bill that was bipartisan will get passed. And I think something will happen on the social spending side, but I don't know how much it'll be, how extensive it'll be. But my guess is something will get done because, frankly, the president and his party are really in trouble right now. The polls show the American people are really depressed with the lack of accomplishment by the president and by his party. The Democratic Party is really suffering in the polls. And so I think in the final analysis, that's going to concentrate enough minds among Democrat senators and Democrat Congress people that they're going to get something done.
People like me would like to see the answer to how we're going to pay for all this. Obviously, our debt's troubling. It's been troubling me since Republicans were in charge. The last 4 or 5 years, the amount of national debt is crushing. I hope we don't have to increase our interest payments for our national debt, or else you folks are going to have a hard time coming up with a budget that works. But talking about all of that, I haven't really seen a responsible bill before you to debate in terms of how we're going to pay this or what these tax increases will be all about, and will they allow us to remain competitive? Is there any effort in the Senate to work up a tax bill, or I saw a number of items being removed from that social services bill, but I'm not quite sure where that is, and maybe you can enlighten us some.
Well, according to the Democrat negotiators, they're saying that in the provisions that they want to pass, that they will put in place tax increases large enough to cover the expenses. And so they're looking at a international tax rate on foreign earnings. They're looking at a minimum corporate income tax. They're looking on raising taxes on the very wealthy in the United States. And these measures plus more IRS, they want to basically double the number of IRS employees, probably tripling the number of IRS auditors. And they believe doing these things will raise enough money to pay for the social spending they want to do, as well as the physical infrastructure. The real challenge, in addition to those bills and paying for them, is how we pay for the rest of the government over the coming years. And there's something that really surprised me as I first got involved in government. And that is the federal budget is only 1/3 of federal spending. 2/3 of federal spending is not even in the budget. 2/3 of federal spending is Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and interest. It's automatic, so-called non-discretionary spending. That's the part that's growing faster than the economy, a lot faster. The budget portion, which is our military and our Justice Department and the EPA, those are growing more slowly than the economy. So that's not where the problem is. The problem is with those that are on automatic pilot, if you will, Medicare, Social Security, and so forth. So the only way we're going to actually get to a balanced budget is if we look honestly at these entitlement programs and find a way to bring them into balance. Not immediately. We're not going to cut benefits for any seniors or for people about to become seniors, but we want to make sure that the promises we're making to young people are promises we can keep and we can afford down the road. And that I've introduced a piece of legislation to do that. I'm hopeful we'll finally be able to tackle that issue, but unless we do, we're going to ultimately face a real economic crisis down the road. Not immediately, but at some point soon.
Well, that gets us to an area that not many Americans are talking about, and that's the world at large and our global threats and what's going on. And many of us have a feeling that maybe the world's a little more dangerous than it was a few years ago, although, you know, we've been having challenges for quite a while. I'm wondering what your take is and what our top priorities should be in terms of keeping America safe.
Well, the biggest challenge that our country faces is the emergence of China as the world's leader, economic leader, military leader, geopolitical leader. We've never faced anything like this before. The old Soviet Union was a basket case economically. They had a strong military, but couldn't keep up with us by any means. When we faced economic competition from Europe, we faced it from individual countries, one by one, much smaller than us. They couldn't possibly keep up with us, particularly after the Second World War, when they were trying to rebuild their respective economies. We've never really faced a major economic competitor like China. China will have a much larger economy than ours. They will have the capacity to fund a much larger military than ours. What is that going to mean? And we can get a sense of that by looking at what China's doing to their own citizens. They're committing genocide, according to the UN, genocide on a population of roughly 1 million in their border. They're repressing religious minorities. They're, of course, censoring their media. You can't get certain social media connections. TV programs are blacked off if they say anything critical of China. Of course, the promises they made to the people of Hong Kong, they've just shredded those. So we get a sense of what life was like in China today. What's the world going to be like if China calls the shots? And we in our country need to come to grips with this reality. And the only way we're going to get China to take a different course than the one they're on is by linking arms with our friends around the world, the Europeans and Australians and people of the nation of India and so forth, and begin to lay out what China must do to have access to our markets and get them to take a different course than the one that they're on, a very predatory, malevolent course, which threatens the freedom of people around the world.
Senator, the one question about the economic challenges from China is, can we remain a country that continues to embrace our free enterprise capitalist system when China and others clearly compete in many ways that are unfair in terms of subsidizing the products that they put out in the marketplace? And how can we remain in a way where our private sector, without government help, competes with these countries that in essence are subsidizing their goods?
Well, you know, in the past, there might have been a country, let's say Italy, that subsidized some of their goods, and you know, we would object and we'd just, you know, jump up and down about it, but it wasn't a threat. It hurt some parts of our economy, perhaps, and some people here felt the brunt of that. But with China, it's a whole different matter, because we're talking about them taking on the major growth industries in the world and dominating them through predatory techniques, subsidy, predatory pricing, and so forth, monopolization, and so forth. And we really only have two courses that make sense. One is to adopt their techniques, which I don't think is likely to happen. And number two is to insist that if they continue to adopt those techniques, that they won't have access to our markets or free access to our markets. And that's something we can do only in combination with other nations, because we alone, the US alone, we're not large enough as part of China's overall economic vision to get them to change course. But if the nations of the Pacific and the nations of Europe and all of us come together and say, China, you can't keep doing that. If you do, we're going to subject you to much higher tariffs, or perhaps even block your products entirely. If that's we have to take one of those two courses. Either we got to start playing the game the way they are, or we got to get them to play the rules that the rest of us play by. But what we're doing right now is neither one. And China is just racking up one success after another, killing American and Western businesses. And that's something we simply cannot allow.
And my last question on this, Senator, is are we being competitive in the world in terms of cybersecurity? There are a lot of places out there that are like rogue countries, and maybe rogue participants within countries that could be called adversaries, and they're out there and ready to cause mayhem. Are we competitive in that arena? And how do you keep up with these rogue players that can cause so much mayhem at home?
Well, I wish I were more of an expert in cyber, in the cyber world and in cybersecurity in particular. But my assessment, based upon the briefings and readings that I've done, is that we continue to be subject to attack from foreign nations from a cyber basis, as well as from non-state actors, that they receive billions upon billions, if not trillions of dollars of value from having stolen technology from us, that they pose a threat to our economy, to our infrastructure, and that we have not found a way to prevent that from happening. What I can't tell you is whether we're doing the same thing to them, and whether they have as much to lose. Of course, our technology is worth a lot more than perhaps the technology of a nation that's not competitive. And so we continue to be attacked, and I'm afraid that we're not very effective in preventing those attacks or to returning fire, if you will, from a cyber standpoint. So this is one more area where I think we have to, as nations that follow the rules, that we have to insist that China crack down on people that are stealing our technology, or again, they can't have access with their products into our market.
I know that you've got to go, but before you do that, I just wanted to convey to you a couple of messages. One, our former president, John Thrasher, who was influential in our creation of our institute, sends his regards. Your former colleague, Senator Mel Martinez, sends his regards. Both he and Governor Bush, both of whom I appreciate you a lot, are part of our advisory board of the Institute. And so we've got a great group of Floridians involved in this effort, and some Democrats as well that are just as prominent, but they in particularly wanted me to convey their best to you, and they're listening and wishing you the very best. Well, thanks, Al. I appreciate each of them. I actually thought President Thrasher was going to be introducing me, and then when President Mccullough came on, it's like, oh, there's been a change of leadership. Exactly. Your things are happening at FSU. Congratulations, and appreciate the work that you're doing. I mean, I think it's critically important that opinion leaders from around the country gather in institutes such as the Institute of Politics that you've created to discuss the issues of the day. And to decide how we're going to deal with them. Because, I mean, the big issues that we face, we've talked about two of them. One is China emerging as the global superpower that will pass us at some point. The other is our debt, and at what point that becomes a crisis level for us. I'd say that our global climate is another one of those. We're really not addressing them effectively. And so having young people come together and talk about these things is critically important. And in my view, some of us have let the country down by not having addressed these earlier on in a way that would have been able to find more purchase than it has so far. Our politics today is mired in
social issues and cultural issues and small bore policy issues as opposed to the big issues we face. And so I applaud the work that you're doing and that the university is doing, and hope that you're successful in bringing thoughtful, energetic voices into the marketplace of ideas.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to have you, Senator, and the students here have greatly appreciated your input, and as have other people who've been listening. Thank you so very much, and keep up the great work.
Thanks, Al. All the best to you.
Thank you. Okay. Hans, are we on or off or?